Hey, this is Mr. Mitchell with another science video. Today we're going to talk about photosynthesis and respiration. Here are the questions. Here is photosynthesis. During photosynthesis, plants convert carbon dioxide and hydrogen into oxygen and sugars. And it takes place in two stages. The first stage is capturing the sun's energy. Now, it will capture the sun's energy out here on the outside where the leaves are. And the second stage is going to be producing the sugars. And you don't really think of sugar with plants, but technically it's a sugar that is the kind of food that is produced. Well, like I said, most of the sun's energy is captured here in the leaves. The green color in a plant's cell, let me say that again. The green color in a plant cell's chloroplasts comes from pigments. This green color comes from pigments, and you may remember that the chloroplasts are like an organelle in a plant cell. And the main pigment is chlorophyll. So the organelles that are chloroplasts have a green color in it that is from pigments, and the main pigment is called chlorophyll. You may have heard in the past that chlorophyll is an essential part of photosynthesis. Chlorophyll functions kind of like the solar panel of a calculator. You know, the solar panel, it absorbs the energy and is able to get use that energy to have the functions of a calculator. Now, chlorophyll captures light energy from the sun and uses it to power the second stage. Now, the second stage needs something. It needs water and carbon dioxide. Now, we're going to talk about water and carbon dioxide. We've got these essential ingredients: sunlight, water, carbon dioxide, and you see that they end up producing things. It's kind of like a mixture. Produce these things, put these things together, and it comes out with these things. It's a chemical change. Now, plants get the water from the soil. Going back to this particular photograph, the plant gets the water from the soil. You know, without the water, the plants would end up dying. And it gets the carbon dioxide from the air. So the water moves up the plant stems to the leaves. The carbon dioxide enters the plant through small openings on the underside of the leaves. These small openings on the underside of the leaves is kind of like the nostrils, you might say, of the plant. That's called the stomata. This is where the carbon dioxide enters, and it's also going to be where the oxygen leaves. So let's see where I got in my notes here. The water and the carbon dioxide all move up into the chloroplast. Now, this is going to be in the leaves here. The leaves is where all the action is going to be taking place. The water and carbon dioxide come up, are moved into the chloroplasts that are in the leaves. That's when the chemical reaction starts. And we'll go back to this one. You may remember seeing this chemical reaction. It takes 6 units of carbon dioxide and 6 units of water whenever you have light that triggers the photosynthesis, will end up producing the sugar, which is C6H12O6. That's glucose. Glucose is what this is. You'll hear about that a lot in this little section. And it produces oxygen. So just like it says down here, takes these 3 things and produces these. The glucose is the food. It's the food that the plants live upon. You know, plants can make their own food. The food that they make is a sugar called glucose. Now, we use glucose also, and you'll find out a little bit about that here in a little bit. The other product, oxygen, is going to exit through the stomata, and this is the Earth's main source of oxygen. The oxygen that comes from the plants is the Earth's main source of oxygen. So here is the formula, as you saw. Now, some of this sugar is going to be converted to cellulose, and some of it is stored later. And the stuff that is stored later is where we get our energy from. Whenever we eat some kind of plants, that's the energy we get from the plants, is this glucose, C6H12O6. So we are actually eating some of that stored energy, and it helps us get energy as well. Now, this is not all we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about something called respiration. Respiration has to do with the animals. Photosynthesis has to do with the plants. Photosynthesis, how the plants got their food. Well, here's how the animals do it. Now, we know how we get our food, but it takes a different formula. Now, let me kind of go over what respiration is in the first place. Respiration is the process of how cells obtain energy from glucose. We have the glucose here that animal cells get. We get the glucose from eating the plants or eating things that ate the plants. And we get energy from it. And you can see this particular thing has energy at the end. We'll talk a little bit about that. During respiration, cells break down simple food molecules, such as sugar, and they will end up releasing the energy they contain. Now, it's a two-step process. The first step is in the cytoplasm. You may remember that whenever you have a cell, the cytoplasm is kind of the gel that kind of holds everything together outside of the nucleus. C6H12O6 is broken into smaller molecules in the cytoplasm. But the next stage is in the mitochondria. You may remember the mitochondria in the cell looks like a kidney bean. We call it the powerhouse of the cell. This is why. You need oxygen for this one. The C6H12O6 combined with the oxygen forms a chemical reaction which produces water and produces what we exhale, carbon dioxide. So we take in the oxygen, it mixes with what we have eaten, the sugar that is broken down from what we have eaten. So what we eat actually has to do with what we breathe out. It's a chemical reaction. You take this sugar, glucose, plus the oxygen we breathe, and it ends up with water and what we exhale. And some of the water actually goes out with our exhale. This is the vapor in our breath. And the whole process gives us energy. Pretty interesting stuff, I think. Well, anyway, trying to look back in my notes, see where I've gotten to. This carbon dioxide is then taken in by the plants. This football player from Alabama breathes out the carbon dioxide. It's taken in by the plants. You may remember that the plants then do something with that. That carbon dioxide, add water, and it produces their food. They release oxygen. So here we are with this plant that releases oxygen. Humans breathe it in, and what do they do with that oxygen? They use the sugar from the food they eat, and it helps produce carbon dioxide. It is a cycle of carbon dioxide and oxygen, and carbon dioxide and oxygen, and it's a symbiotic relationship that we as animals and plants cannot live without. Now, I do want to talk about fermentation. Fermentation is a way of providing energy for cells without using oxygen. You may remember this energy is dependent in part on oxygen and the sugar, but fermentation actually can provide a little bit of energy. Now, this is not near as much energy as you would get in the main respiration or photosynthesis formula. But some organisms like deep down in the ocean that don't have access to oxygen can get a little energy by something called fermentation. It's not much compared to the other energy processes. But fermentation actually can happen here on land. Happens in baking, happens in brewing, well, it's called alcoholic fermentation. And also in our body, there's a kind of fermentation where you get some energy without oxygen. It's provided by something called lactic acid. Lactic acid fermentation is when your muscles can't get oxygen quick enough. Say you're in a race and you're using up oxygen very quickly. Sometimes lactic acid can provide you some energy through the fermentation process. And what the result is some soreness after the lactic acid has provided all that energy. Hey, I hope you have learned something about how the plant's photosynthesis is related to our respiration, not just in our oxygen and carbon dioxide, but what it has to do with glucose and with these formulas. Don't forget to answer the questions.